I should have known the moment he hesitated. The night we returned from our honeymoon, I stood barefoot in the center of our new home, a modest townhouse tucked between nearly identical homes on a quiet cul-de-sac. The walls were bare, the air smelled faintly of paint and cardboard, and I felt something shift in my chest. He was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. It hadn't in months, I realized. My name is Christina, and this is the story of how I mistook a beginning for a promise, a hesitation for shyness, and a man's silence for depth. We met in the fluorescent wash of a conference room. I was in HR, fresh off a promotion, and he was a senior engineer, quiet, respected, and recently single. Everyone whispered about his breakup with Elena, the ex-girlfriend he never mentioned but whose ghost seemed to trail behind him like perfume. He was handsome in a bookish, withdrawn way. I admired him from afar until that night at the company's holiday party, when everything changed. I'd had 2 glasses of champagne. He'd had 3. He was slouched at the edge of the patio, alone, nursing a bourbon, and something about his isolation made me reckless. We kissed behind a hedge. Or maybe I kissed him. I remember the weight of his mouth, the coolness of his hands, the way he didn't stop me. The next morning, he didn't say much. But he didn't pull away either. That was enough for me. I told myself he was slow to open up. That he was cautious, thoughtful, and damaged. I mistook his reservation for depth, his absence for mystery. He never told me he loved me. Not once in the first year. But he stayed. That was all the affirmation I thought I needed. By the time he proposed, I had already planned our life together in my head. A cottage with ivy, 3 children with his eyes, and my laugh. I had chosen schools, imagined holidays, and even named the dog. He proposed at a dinner I arranged, in a restaurant I picked, with a ring I hinted at. He slid it onto my finger with a weary smile. Of course, he said when I asked if he was sure. Of course. However, there was no direction, there was only inertia and the relentless passage of time. Both of us were approaching our mid-30s. His parents, who were distant and traditional, had recently called to check in. My mother cried when I shared the news with her. We prayed for this, she said. You deserve love. I wish I had taken the time to ask myself what I truly deserved from love, instead. 6 months into our marriage, I brought up starting a family. He looked startled, like I had flung cold water in his face. Already, he asked. We're not getting younger, I said, trying to keep it light. And we always said. You said. He interrupted. I never agreed to that timeline. That was the first fight. Not loud, not cruel. Just distance solidifying into words. We tried couples therapy. I was the one who booked it. He nodded politely during the sessions, answered questions with precision, and never once raised his voice. But when the therapist asked if he wanted to build a future with me, he hesitated. I don't know, he said quietly. In the sessions that followed, truths peeled back like wallpaper in a damp house. He had been in love once, deeply. With Elena. They'd broken up not because they fell out of love, but because she wanted to move abroad for a fellowship. He stayed behind, too afraid to start over somewhere new. She was the one, he said one afternoon, not looking at me. My hands went numb. I stopped hearing the therapist's voice. All I could focus on was that sentence, suspended in the air between us like smoke. She was the one. Then why did he marry me? Later, I asked. He looked at me with tired eyes. I thought I could grow into it. You were there. It felt easier. You made the decision for both of us. I seduced you, I said bitterly. You gave me something to hold on to, he replied. After that, I clung to him even harder. Like a drowning woman clutching driftwood, I tried to build intimacy with candles, weekend trips, and long conversations about nothing. He responded with polite distance, affectionate but absent. I couldn't understand how someone could live beside me and still be somewhere else. Then one night, I found an old photo album in his office. Tucked behind books, wrapped in a sweater. Elena, smiling. Her arms were around him, both of them radiant. No version of us looked like that. The realization came slowly, like thawing ice. I had been alone in this marriage from the beginning. I had built a future from borrowed bricks and forced a connection through hope and habit. And the deeper truth was this. I didn't really love him either. I loved the idea of being chosen. Of being safe. Of proving to myself and the world that I could have a happy ending. But you can't conjure love from absence. You can't build a house without doors and expect someone to stay. We divorced a year later. Quietly. No children, no property disputes, no drama. I packed my things while he was away on a work trip. There wasn't much to divide. Most of what filled our house was decorative, gifts from our wedding registry that had never really belonged to either of us. I left the framed photos on the mantel. I didn't want to take a memory of something that was never quite real. We signed the papers at a neutral office downtown. He was calm, kind, even, like always. I had rehearsed a dozen final things to say, but in the end, I only asked if he'd be okay. He said yes. And asked me the same. I said I wasn't sure yet. But that I would be. 2 weeks later, he texted and asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I hesitated. I stared at the message for a long time, wondering what purpose it would serve. But something in me needed closure that was gentler than ink on a page. We met at a cafe near the old park we used to walk through in the early months of dating, when we still thought mystery was romantic, not hollow. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. He looked lighter, almost boyish. The heavy fog that had settled around his features over the last few years had lifted. He stood when he saw me and pulled out my chair. I sat down and smiled. "Hi." "Hi," he said, his voice soft. "You look good." "Thanks." "So do you." There was a pause, but it wasn't heavy. He cleared his throat. I wasn't sure if I should reach out. But I kept thinking about all the things I never said. I raised an eyebrow. There were a lot of those. He nodded. Too many. Silence again. We both watched people pass outside the cafe window, umbrellas bobbing through the drizzly afternoon. "I'm sorry," he said, finally. His voice cracked slightly. "For marrying you when I wasn't ready. For trying to build something on top of something unfinished. For hurting you without ever meaning to." I stared down at my cup. I didn't want to cry. Not now. Not here. "I know," I said quietly. "I wasn't fair to you," he continued. "You gave more than I ever did. And the worst part is, I let you." I swallowed hard. I was trying to earn something I thought I already had. He looked at me then, his eyes rimmed red. "You deserved to be chosen. Not just accepted." "I did," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. There was a long pause. We both took a breath. "I hope you find someone who chooses you every day," he said. I smiled, slowly and sadly. "I hope you do, too." We sat there a little while longer, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the rain bead on the windowpane. When it was time to go, there was no hug, no tears, no backward glances. Just a quiet parting between two people who finally told the truth. I've learned something about love. It can't be forced. It can't be willed into being. And it certainly can't be substituted with rituals and milestones. Love, real love, grows in the space between two people who are fully themselves and still choose each other. It comes from truth, not convenience. From freedom, not fear. We think commitment is the thing that will create love. But without love, commitment is just another kind of loneliness. A house without doors. And I refuse to live there again. It's been 3 years. There's a small garden now in the back of the house I bought on my own, a little fixer-upper with creaky floors and uneven shelves, but it's mine. The kind of house where you can breathe with the windows open and dance barefoot in the kitchen. I've learned to love the sound of my own footsteps echoing through the quiet. Every morning, I water the rosemary by the window and feed the stray cat that adopted me last fall. I named her Cleo. She comes and goes as she pleases, curling up by the radiator like she's always belonged here. In some ways, she reminds me of myself. On Saturdays, I take long walks to the market. I buy flowers for no reason. Sometimes I sit on a bench with my coffee and just watch the world go by, people rushing, laughing, living. And for the first time in my adult life, I don't feel like I'm waiting for something to begin. It already has. I took a solo trip to Portugal last year. Sat by the sea with my journal. No itinerary, no hand to hold, just my own quiet company. I thought I'd be lonely. Instead, I felt whole. Some nights, I make pasta from scratch and play old jazz records. I talk to friends more. Real friends. The kind who ask how you're doing and stay to hear the answer. We laugh, we cry, we show up for each other. And once a week, I write. Not for work. Not for anyone else. Just little pieces of myself, stitched into pages. Sometimes I write about him, not with anger, but with distance. With clarity. With understanding. He wasn't the villain. I wasn't the fool. We were simply two people trying to build love on borrowed ground. But now I've planted my own. Love hasn't returned. Not yet. But if it does, I'll meet it at the door. I'll welcome it in if it brings peace, not panic. Freedom, not fear. Until then, I am not waiting. I am blooming. Right here. On my own. And that, I've learned, is more than enough.